The Ole Miss Rebels won 13 games last year. That was the most in program history. They went to the college football playoff semifinal. We know LSU took Lane Kiffin. We know a bunch of assistants with them, including the offensive coordinator. You look at Pete Golding, though, I think he's pressed the right buttons. He has pressed the right buttons since he took over at the beginning of the playoff last year. And now those buttons being pressed are carrying over into what's been a very impressive fall camp. Now, the first thing we're hearing out of Oxford is that the most interesting man in the program right now is actually the backup quarterback. Well, stop me if you've heard that before, right? Everyone loves the backup, but this one in particular is unique, and I will explain why here in just a minute. But this is Deuce Knight. He transfers from from Auburn to Ole Miss. They scrimmaged Saturday, and it was closed to everybody. No public access, no media access. Trinidad Chambliss played one series, and then they handed the offense to Deuce Knight, and he ran with it. And the verdict from people that watched it closely is that Deuce Knight was the star of the show, without a doubt. And that's interesting because if you watch what Deuce Knight was back in April, if you listen to people talking about his spring performance, he had a tough time going through the progressions. You could tell he was going to take the snap, throw it to the first receiver. It didn't matter if he was open or not. And if that first guy wasn't off, he was going to take off and go make a play. And against pressure, he was maybe a little bit tentative about where the ball was supposed to go. Well, here's where he was on Saturday. He was spot on. He got it to the hot receiver when they decided to blitz. When they got in his face, he knew and had a plan where to go with it. He worked through his progressions. He was really good on deep balls. It sounds like he's a completely different player. And a lot of people are giving the credit to Joe Judge, the quarterback's coach. And he's going to be a problem in his own right? He's 6'5". He's 225 pounds. You mix in a quarterback draw with a guy that's that size who can run. That's a real weapon. So why does the backup quarterback matter this much? Why have we spent the last couple minutes talking about the backup quarterback at Ole Miss? Well, Chambliss was the backup quarterback last year. Having an insurance policy at that position is significant because Chambliss right now, he is the straw that stirs the drink in Oxford, Mississippi. We know that, right? And Ole Miss just found out in scrimmage number 1 that if, God forbid, something happened to Trinidad Chambliss, they'd be okay. Like they have a guy that can come off the bench. If Trinidad needs a rest or needs a sip of Gatorade, the guy that come off the bench and give him good reps, which is a really valuable thing that might pay dividends for any program in college football nowadays. Having two is extremely valuable. The other thing I'm hearing right now, and you don't hear it often, but it sounds like the offense has been slightly ahead of the defense at Ole Miss, which is unique. You don't hear that very much because if you look at the conditions, the defense, by all accounts, controlled most of camp prior to their first scrimmage last weekend. Sound like Kewan Lacey and others they weren't all going. You also didn't have necessarily some starters on defense. We're down like Centurion Perkins and Cam Franklin and Will Eccles. They didn't play very much as well. And the running game was essentially some type of variation of two-hand touch. So it wasn't full contact. And the offense winning a scrimmage in that type of setting is understandable, especially when the defense isn't permitted to tackle and without most of the front seven's best players and the backfield missing a starter or two. So it's not necessarily a criticism of Ole Miss defense, just how camp works. So it's a little bit of a warning label about what a scrimmage result actually is. And we're going to see it a bunch throughout camp. So those that are saying, well, what's wrong with the defense at Ole Miss? Just don't worry about it. The defense has actually been ahead of the offense in the first 8 or 9 practices. It was just the scrimmage where the offense got the better end of the performance. The last thing out of Ole Miss, and it might be one of my favorite observations, and it's about their center on Bryson Sanders from the same former player that had been watching this closely. Sounds like the snaps were all good. No high snaps, no low snaps. Nobody had to go chase the ball. And you think that's simple? You think that's something that should be taken for granted? And it's not always simple when you got a head-up defender right on the center. I mean, the whole position is evaluated by the absence of a problem. And the guy that watched him watched something that the rest of us didn't necessarily pay attention to. A couple more that held up too. Sound like Caleb Cunningham got into the teamwork, caught a touchdown pass. Sounds like Carius Kern took some reps at right tackle and did a pretty good job. And that's a young man who spent much of the summer kind of working out and sounds like someone kind of got in his ear and has challenged that group. And on defense, there's one name that continues to stand out, and that's Keaton Thomas. He's in from Baylor. It sounds like he's the real deal. Apparently, this guy is making plays all over the field. Now, here's what this all adds up to. You have a real backup quarterback that might change how Pete Golding and John David Baker, their offensive coordinator, coached this season. When your only functional quarterback is the entire offense, you want to protect him, right? You're not going to run Trinidad Chambliss in the red zone because you got to protect him. You take quarterback draw off the call sheet. You take quarterback sweep off the call sheet. You get him down. You say, don't fight for extra yards. Well, when you got a sophomore that is playing at a high level behind you, you just go and let Trinidad Chambliss play. That's not necessarily a depth chart note. That's a play calling decision that might pay dividends every single Saturday. But the scrimmage told us what we also don't know, is because you can't necessarily evaluate a defense and a run game based on two-hand touch. So the second scrimmage will be the real one. We'll find out exactly what the offense looks like with Kejuan Lacey and whether or not you have to move a defender off of it. Because we know Ole Miss can score. What we have to now find out in the next 10 days is how good they are in the front seven defensively and if that run game will be as good as it was a year ago.